Welcome back to Ghost Pirate Entertainment. I'm your host, Kanan Becker, and today we do another deep dive into Tubi. And let's get to the list.
I can't wait to kill her.
All Eyes is the 2022 dark horror comedy, written and directed by the Greenlee brothers. It stars Jasper Hammer, Ben Hall, and Danielle Yvonne Ploger. The story's about a disgraced podcaster who interviews an eccentric farmer who claims to have a monster living in the woods near his house.
Look, I don't like you, but my wife really did. Because of that, and only that, I think it's fitting that you be the one to tell my story.
So this was a brand new discovery for me this week. I had never heard of this. It's a really small movie. So going in, you got to keep in mind, this is a very small kind of project. It's not something that's going to have wild special effects, nothing super over the top. But I'll be damned if this movie isn't a lot of fun. It has a really great heart to it, and it goes in a lot of directions that caught me really by surprise. Because I went into this movie completely blind. I had never even seen a trailer. I had no idea what to expect. And it's really surprising. It has a great heart to it, and some really great characters that you really find yourself pulling for. It takes a really interesting twist about halfway through, and turns into something totally different for a while. But then it comes back around. This is a really fun little indie project, so keep your expectations low, and I think you'll be surprised how great of a time you have with it.
This is the end of what? Of time?
Byzantium is a 2012 vampire horror movie. Directed by Neil Jordan, it stars Gemma Arterton, Saoirse Ronan, and Sam Riley. When two female vampires are on the run from a powerful group, they take refuge in a seaside British town.
My name is Eleanor Webb.
My mother lives on human blood and has done for 2 centuries.
So I did talk about this in last week's video, Vampires Part 2. If you haven't seen that yet, definitely go check it out. But it's such a great movie, I wanted to let you guys know that it's available right now over on Tubi. And I didn't mention this in that video, but it's done by the same director, Neil Jordan, who did Interview with the Vampire. And it has a very similar vibe to it. I'm not saying it's the same movie or even on that same grand of a scope. Much more of a smaller, lower budget film. And it's more of an isolated situation, more dialogue driven and all of that. I think it's an absolutely beautifully done story with wonderful acting and just a great little moody film that I think really flies under the radar and absolutely is one I recommend checking out right now while it's on Tubi. Dead Snow is a 2009 Norwegian horror comedy. Directed by Tommy Wirkola, it stars Charlotte Frogner, Stig Froder Henderson, and Figur Hole. The film focuses on a group of students surviving a Nazi zombie attack in the mountains of Norway. So I hadn't seen this movie in years, probably back near when it first came out, and I remember having a lot of fun with it then, but man, it is so much more entertaining than I remembered it being. Because just the idea of these zombie Nazis, they're just creepy and badass. This movie also gets really, really gory. But my favorite thing about it is how bloody and brutal it gets on the snow. There's just something about these Nazi zombies that look ferocious, just tearing people apart and getting blown apart, you know, both happen, and it's in the snow. It just makes that red blood and everything just that much more badass. But the design and special effects in this are super well done, and just in general, it's not anything deep. This isn't like an amazing, game-changing movie. It's just a wild, gory, fun time. So if you're just looking for something to entertain you, I highly recommend it.
We are as close as we are ever going to get to catching this man.
God forbid we become friendly.
I don't find you that interesting.
You will.
Hannibal is a 2013 psychological horror series developed by Brian Fuller for NBC. It's based on a series of characters and elements appearing in Thomas Harrison's novels Red Dragon, Hannibal, and Hannibal Rising. It stars Mads Mikkelsen, Hugh Dancy, and Lawrence Fishburne. The story focuses on the relationship between FBI Special Investigator Will Graham and Dr. Hannibal Lecter, a forensic psychiatrist.
You catch these killers by getting into their heads, but you also allow them into your own, because you are unique.
So I rarely talk about series on this channel, and it's not because I don't enjoy them or want to cover them. It's just so hard to cover a series because there are just so many episodes. It's one thing to cover a 2-hour movie. It's another thing to cover a 10 or more episode season when they're 45 minutes to an hour each episode. But in this case, when I saw that this series popped up on Tubi, I was so excited because this is one of my all-time favorite series. And it's wild because this originally aired on network TV on NBC. And I'm not a big fan of network shows. They're just usually neutered and very polished, and the gore and all of that is just taken out. They don't feel real. There isn't real feeling dialogue. Everything just feels, too clean, too, CSI kind of thing. And no hate towards you if you enjoy those. I'm just talking about, for me, I generally prefer, if I'm watching TV series, ones on HBO or Showtime, etc., because they can really have the teeth and really have the brutality and all that makes it feel real and also makes it compelling. But somehow, I don't know how they were able to pull it off, this show does not feel that way. They get pretty gory with some absolutely terrifying situations and lots of brutality. They just did it in a very smart way that even though you're not seeing anything, you are seeing things. It's hard to explain, but like the way they use food feels very gory and graphic, even though all you're seeing is just like a piece of meat, but you know what that meat is and you know how it got there, and it's just a really smartly put together show. And it's also interesting because this show was put together by Brian Fuller, and he is who's putting together Crystal Lake, that new Friday the 13th series that's going to be coming out on Peacock soon. But this show is fantastic on so many levels. It's creepy, disturbing, and just an absolutely badass series. So if you've never seen this series, I highly, highly recommend it. Baskin is a 2015 Turkish surrealist horror movie. Directed by Can Evernal, it's based on his 2013 short film of the same name. It stars Mehmet Sarahoglu and Ergin Kawayuku. The plot centers around 5 police officers who have inadvertently wandered into hell.
Arda, sana bir şey söyleyeceğim. Burada bizden başkasını görüyor musun?
Wow, this movie is dark, demented, and absolutely haunting. It's one of those kind of movies that just makes your skin crawl. It's so uncomfortable and twisted on absolutely every level. It's really hard to even convey the levels of weirdness and bizarre depravity that are on screen in this. But it's really compelling. It's one of those kind of films that even though it's extremely disturbing, you can't take your eyes off it. It just sucks you in. But the visuals and the way they portray hell and this whole environment that you're in, it's really, really interesting and not like anything really I've ever seen before. This isn't the kind of movie for the faint of heart. If you're not into really twisted, dark, demented shit, then definitely avoid this. But if you like to watch demented, bizarre, creative movies, but the ones that make you feel like you need to take a shower, then by all means, check it out. Braid is a 2018 psychological horror movie. Written and directed by Mitzi Perrone, it stars Madeline Brewer, Imogen Waterhouse, and Sarah Hay. 2 wanted women decide to steal from a wealthy yet mentally unstable friend who lives in a fantasy world. But to do so, the fugitives must take part in a deadly, perverse game of make-believe.
So, how do you want to do this?
We'll need to search the whole house to find the safe.
to do so, we're gonna have to play the game.
So I've mentioned this movie one other time on this channel before, but I wanted to talk about it again because I still don't feel like enough people have seen this, and it's wonderfully creative and unique and really just a different kind of movie. Just the way it looks, the style of it, the pacing of it. It's a small, kind of a little bit of a slow burn, but it gets so weird and twisted and goes down this wild rabbit hole, keeping you guessing and trying to figure out what's going on. On top of that, it has a really interesting ending. Just the acting, the style, the way it looks, everything about this movie is what I love about little indie movies. Just the creativity that small filmmakers are able to come up with. And this is one of those movies that I love sharing because I know that if some of you were to give it a chance, you'd be really surprised at how much you enjoy it.
I want to go home.
Hatchet is a 2006 slasher horror movie. Written and directed by Adam Green, it stars Kane Hodder, Perry Shin, and Tamara Fieldman. The plot follows a group of tourists on a New Orleans haunted swamp tour who accidentally get stranded in the wilderness only to be hunted by a vengeful supernatural man who kills anyone that enters the swamp.
And there was a bad fire. When his daddy chopped down the door to save him, he didn't know Victor was pressed against the other side. And poor Victor Crowley died.
So I absolutely love the Hatchet movies. Just Victor Crowley is such a badass, underrated slasher killer. Because they're so meta, they just know what they're trying to be. They're very much a throwback to that 1980s slasher movie. And as the series of movies continued, you just saw Green involve all these different stars, these people from the 80s that were in all these different slasher movies that were our absolute favorites. But everything is just turned up to 11 in these. The gore is absolutely insane, but it's all practically done, and it just is so much fun. This is a breath of fresh air if you're someone that enjoys those 80s slashers, because it just brings all that back, but also pokes a little fun at it. I know that I just have a blast with these movies. Yes, they're not perfect. Yes, they're kind of low budget and campy, but that's the charm of them. That's what is so wonderful about them. On top of that, I think Victor Crowley, played by Kane Hodder, is just absolutely badass. His look and his physicality is just fantastic, especially because Kane Hodder had just been unceremoniously not hired to be Jason in the Freddy vs. Jason movie that he had been promised and had talked about for years and years and years, and they just have someone else play the role. And it's never set right with me. As much as I do love Freddy vs. Jason, it just would have been that much better to see Kane Hodder as Jason, because for a lot of us, he is Jason. Like, my favorite Friday the 13th movies are the ones that he's in them. But because of that, he was cast and put in to be Victor Crowley. And he was just the beginning of this franchise. He's played Victor Crowley in all the movies, and he's just absolutely phenomenal in this role. So if it's been a while, or if for whatever reason you've never seen these, I highly recommend it. Get some popcorn and just have a great time with them, because they're perfect for that entertaining, not too heady kind of movie. You just check your brain at the door and just have a blast with it.
We're not listening to him, okay?
Ghoul is a 2015 Czech mockumentary-style horror movie. Directed by Petri Jockey, it stars Jennifer Armour, Jeremy Isabella, and Paul S. Tracy. An American film crew goes to Ukraine to investigate stories of widespread cannibalism, only to summon the spirit of a notorious serial killer and cannibal.
Ina is going to show us the ancient technique of invoking the spirits. Oh.
What's that?
What is that?
This movie is so badass and clever. It's just such a creative, interesting idea, because this movie is fantasy. It's not, a real mockumentary, documentary kind of thing, right? But everything around this movie is real. The cannibalism and all that stuff in Ukraine, that's a real story that's really grounded in factual events. And then they take a real life famous serial killer, one of the most prolific serial killers ever, to be honest, and they put him in this. And just the way it's done, it gives it that extra feeling of realness, and you can just kind of get sucked into it even more so because of that. And even if you're someone that's not a big fan of found footage style movies, I think you'd be surprised and actually enjoy this one, because it doesn't feel like any other found footage documentary style of movie I've ever seen. It just has this very unique quality about it. Just the way it's shot and overall style of it is fantastically done. It also gets extremely eerie, twisted, and absolutely creepy as hell. This is a wonderful little gem that I highly, highly recommend.
Or she'll rip your tongue out at the seam.
Dead Silence is a 2007 supernatural horror movie, directed by James Wan and written by Lee Winnell. It stars Ryan Quanten, Amber Valletta, and Donnie Wahlberg. After his wife meets a grisly end, a young widower returns to his hometown to search for answers to her death. So I have a real soft spot for this movie. I would never say this is per se like a great movie, and even though it's not early 2000s, it very much feels like from that era. But there's just this really weird, strange charm that this movie has, especially now after seeing *Malignant* and seeing what he has in him, all these inspirations from all the different horror that he grew up with. This movie makes even more sense because the tone and weirdness and just overall strange bizarreness of this movie really fits into that *Malignant* type of universe. But I just love how even though it's a little bit later into the 2000s, it still has that early 2000s cheese where everything just feels kind of too polished, kind of a little bit campy and hokey, but there's just something wonderful about it. But on top of that, I think this movie actually has some genuinely creepy scenes and moments and just things that happen in general. But it's not anything to take serious, and I get all the hate that this movie gets because it does have flaws, it does have holes, there are things that just don't make sense about it, but I can't help it. I absolutely love this movie, but there's a lot of people like myself that just love this movie. It has this soft spot for us. Just the puppets and everything about it, it's just a great time and absolutely worth checking out while it's on Tubi.
Something's wrong with me.
Slither is a 2006 dark comedy sci-fi horror movie, written and directed by James Gunn in his directorial debut. It stars Nathan Fillion, Elizabeth Banks, Greg Henry, and Michael Rooker. The story's set in a small town in South Carolina that becomes invaded by a malevolent alien parasite.
They're doing things to people, turning them into some kind of monsters.
This is one of the most fun times I think you can have watching a movie. Everything about this movie is bonkers, over the top. It's got gore, it's got uncomfortable, weird body horror. It's so funny, but also creepy and disturbing. It's gross. It's just so wacky and bizarre and iconic on so many levels. There's that word again that I know some of you guys hate me because I say iconic too much, I guess, even though I never think I say it much, but still, there's that word again. Every time I say iconic, I'm gonna point at you guys. But it's definitely not a movie to take serious on any level. But I think it's a perfect pick for your Saturday night. So do yourself a favor. Grab your popcorn and your candy and enjoy! Alright guys, that's gonna do it for me today. Thank you so much for watching. If you guys enjoyed this, do me a favor. Hit the subscribe button and ding that little bell because that's the best way to keep track of this channel and when I post videos like this, and I post videos like this every single week. And I also want to give a huge, massive, enormous thank you to the Ghost Pirate crew, to you guys over on Patreon, and to the channel members over here. You guys mean so much to me. Just your support just really keeps my fire burning. Just telling me that I'm onto something, that you guys really believe enough to give a few bucks my way to help actually financially support me while I get this channel off the ground. But if you'd like to find out how you can become a part of the Ghost Pirate crew on Patreon, there's a link down in the description. Or if you want to become a channel member, there's a little button down there that says join. But like always, thank you so much for watching. Please crush that like button. And remember, guys, horror can be fun! And if you enjoyed this, click right here to watch my top 10 alien horror movie list. And I'll see you guys next time!